These are my YouTube AdSense earnings in 2021, before I left YouTube to become an investment banker. Yes, you heard that correctly, I left the entrepreneurial lifestyle to join an investment bank. But why? Let's go. But first, to understand why, we need to go back to 2011, when I started making YouTube videos, and figure out what went wrong. Check the timestamps in the description for which section you want to watch first. I started watching YouTube videos in 2008, in the days of stop-motion Lego, Call of Duty sniper montages, and Freddie W short films. I was inspired by the creativity and the enjoyment those early YouTubers seemed to exhibit, and figured I'd try my own hand at making some short movies for some friends. In 2011, when I was 12, we made what I thought were brilliant 2 to 4 minute short action sequences featuring hand-to-hand combat, guns, dialogue, stories, and critically, Nerf guns. But my downfall was this. I had mentioned it to someone at school, and word leaked to the whole school of what we were doing. This was well before the idea of being a YouTuber was even close to being considered cool. So I was roasted. A lot. People would run around screaming at me, "Pew pew, Nerf nerds, pew pew!" There were comments slung on Facebook and Twitter, and after only making 5 or 6 videos, me and my friends quit in order to rescue our social identities at the beginning of high school. I would realize only much later in life that people only made fun of us because they weren't curious. They didn't appreciate we had interests which we were keen to explore, and that divergence from the status quo wasn't necessarily a bad thing. If you were struggling with bullying at any stage in your life, I strongly encourage that you watch this scene from Ted Lasso called "Be Curious, Not Judgmental." It's a beautifully crafted scene and script and really puts into context bullying and how one can still triumph. Anyway, I didn't realize when I was 12 that their opinions didn't matter. Anyone who is relevant and important in your life is someone who lifts you up and celebrates you, not someone who tears you down. If we had stuck to making short films, once we'd gotten a little bit better, maybe we would have been up there with the Freddie W's of the world, or some of the many YouTube comedy sketch channels that you see here today. Also, shout out to Michael, who was the only person who complimented our short films and encouraged us to continue. In 2011, with my very squeaky preteen voice, I poorly attempted making some Call of Duty commentaries, but I was only getting 5 to 10 views per video. I didn't understand that the YouTube algorithm had yet to find the right audience for me, and I didn't even know on YouTube that you could look at analytics to find out what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. But the main issue was I lacked patience. I wanted to feel success and popularity immediately, and it seemed like a waste of time posting 200 videos if the first 10 had already failed. I didn't know that if I kept iterating through video production and reflecting on past videos, I would improve the video's quality over time and would be almost guaranteed to succeed, given that in 2011, YouTube had very little competition, even in the gaming space. This is a principle that still applies on YouTube today. It takes time for your videos to get to a level of video quality that people actually want to watch them, and I don't define quality by having fancy editing and a nice camera. Quality is when your video meets and exceeds the expectations of the viewer and makes them feel the emotions you intended them to feel when watching the video, and the emotions they intended to experience when watching the video. If those two things align, your video can be shot on a janky aspect ratio on an old iPhone and people will pay attention. I ultimately quit after posting 10 or 15 COD commentaries because I thought I was failing. A few years later, I'd realized I was actually succeeding even if only on 10 viewers, because I'd taken a step that most people wouldn't just by getting started, and I had created the conditions for future growth but had bailed too soon to see them bear fruit. Fast forward to 2018, I was in university studying finance and I was broke, jobless, and living off £200 a month that my mum would send me each month. So I revisited my earlier interest in YouTube. I'd spent 10 years watching content and I noticed some interesting trends come and go, so I thought now I'd be better positioned to grow a channel. Since I'm a musician, my YouTube feed was littered with random music recommendations, and one day I noticed a video titled 8D Sound. To which I was immediately triggered, because there's no such thing as 8D sound, but that wasn't going to stop me clicking on the video. It turned out someone was actually just re-uploading songs but panning the audio between left and right, so it felt like the music was slowly traveling around your head in some weird circular 3D effect. These videos were getting millions of views, so I figured might give it a shot. Well, it turns out being the second entrant to a niche pays off. The lack of saturation added to the virality of the music videos meant within a few weeks of consistently posting, the channel had erupted in views. Unfortunately, since the channel was by no means original content, I did not get it monetized, and I went back to the drawing board. I thought, what was easy to do, fast to make, and appealing to many? Reddit posts. I set out with a friend to produce Ask Reddit videos which, with an automated Python script, would scrape for funny Reddit posts and break them down into a video format. Since the videos were automated, I could release 3 to 4 videos per day, building lots of momentum, and within 6 weeks I was getting over 50,000 daily views. To sustain this, I built a community around memes and curiosity, and over the course of the next few months I gained over 50,000 subscribers, and a few £1,000s in AdSense revenue. However, the music stopped abruptly, as YouTube became stricter on automated content production and demonetized the channel. This was the turning point. YouTube had made it clear to me that the fast lane was not the route to long-term success on the platform. Success being defined by revenue over time and not views, as if you can't monetize your views in some form, then monetarily speaking, they're worthless. I took the money from the Reddit channel that I hadn't blown passing in university and hired an animator for a kids channel catering to babies and toddlers. An expensive niche where videos can easily cost thousands of dollars each, but one that had high viewing potential since there was limited content on the platform for toddlers and lots of replayability since parents will just loop videos for their babies or replay their favorite ones over and over. Given I had an analytical background from doing quantitative subjects my whole life, I became very nerdy over the details of YouTube analytics, understanding what drove different types of viewer sources, how viewers behaved, and critically, how the algorithm acted and changed over time. With that approach, the baby channel grew tremendously quickly, and to this day, this is still my best earning YouTube channel over the last 5 years, and it's really rewarding because I get emails from parents and guardians of all ages saying how their little ones enjoy the videos. Using the proceeds from the kids channel, I expanded into movie reviews, psychology, sports, and anime, outsourcing all of the production but retaining ownership over the strategic direction, thumbnails, and titling of the videos. Between 2019 and 2021, the team I had contracted grew from 1 to 27. 27 freelancers working globally across 7 or 8 YouTube channels and producing 20 plus videos per week that I needed animating, writing, editing, and research for. This resulted in those channels collectively doing $30,000 a month in revenue with roughly 5 to 10k in expenses depending on the month. At the same time, I was diversifying our revenue streams for each channel by building out merchandising such as t-shirts, hoodies, and even onesies for babies. This was a lot to manage as I was the sole coordinator and the amount of moving parts was crazy, and a little bit emotionally draining. If I felt a freelancer was underperforming, I'd try support them over the course of a few weeks to get them up to speed, but sometimes that didn't work or I just didn't have the time. So they had to be fired, which was painful because I'd built relationships with these people, and this might have been a key source of income for them. But ultimately I took the view that if someone was not performing, then the channel was likely to underperform, and if the channel was underperforming, we might have to cancel the channel, and that meant we had to fire more people. In 2021, as we were expanding rapidly, I had been pursuing another interest, investment banking. I had built an interest in economics from age 17 when in college I'd sit down with my teacher in between classes and we'd discuss articles in The Economist magazine around macroeconomic trends and business. Hence why I took finance and psychology at university and in parallel to YouTube was planning on exploring economics through investment banking. In 2021, I was on my second round of applying to graduate schemes, as the first time around in 2019, I had no idea of the application process and got rejected from 19 financial institutions through mostly online pre-recorded interviews. I had succeeded in getting one in-person assessment center, which I was so terrified of doing, as I'd never been in a corporate setting before, I'd never worn a suit before, and I'd never been to the city that the interview was even being held in. The fear was so strong that I had to find a clothing store near the venue to buy a new suit shirt that wasn't drenched in sweat. I had to drink a load of caffeine because I hadn't slept the night before in fear of failure. And then I had to slam a bunch of ashwagandha and CBD oil to try and ease the anxiety, which made me feel sick and nauseous. The silly thing is, the moment I started talking in the interview and mini assessments that we did, I was completely relaxed, articulate, and I shocked some of the interviewers with my thinking processes and level of detail. I came away from that really scary day in complete triumph and a newfound confidence in myself to portray who I am. Which is why I was devastated when I was ultimately rejected from the role because one of the 5 examiners didn't like my answer to one question. This time though, I wised up, did my research, softened my strong northern accent, which had negative social connotations to it.
Well, it's 4:40 a.m.
And wham, just like that, I had 2 offers from major banks and from 2 large accounting and consulting firms. I took an internship at a major global investment bank which had the broadest career prospects, smashed it, and got a graduate offer. Which left me with a big question. Why would I take a graduate role in a bank where I'd be at the bottom of the ladder with no authority or autonomy when I was already in charge of 25 plus freelancers and making more money than I would in the bank for at least another 5 years? There's this really famous psychology experiment where participants are put in an empty room with nothing but a button with no instructions. The participant's task is simply to sit in the room until the timer runs out, but consistently participants would after a period of time press the button out of curiosity and boredom. The button then zapped them. A big surprise, I'm sure, but what's even more surprising is moments later the participants would press the button again, and again, and again. Why would they choose to press the buzzer knowing it would hurt them? Stimulation. The absence of any stimuli was so discomforting that pain was preferable, as at least you could experience something temporarily. In a sense, this is how I felt with YouTube in the middle of 2021. By this stage, I had felt a lot of stagnation. Not financially, but intellectually and operationally, as I was pigeonholed into being an overseer and manager of what was a busy but very simple and repetitive business model. Find a new YouTube niche that was not oversaturated. Hire an eager team, build a strategy, make a pilot, release videos, break down the analytics, adjust the videos depending on what the analytics told me, make money, and start the cycle all over again. Sounds great in theory, but I wanted to be challenged, and similar to when I was 11 and first on YouTube, I wanted to be curious again. So I took the graduate job in 2021 in the hopes of, well, essentially being more stimulated. I promoted one of my contractors to be head of operations of all my YouTube channels, and I committed to the corporate lifestyle. Then about a year later, I started to notice my lack of intentionality and split focus on YouTube had caused our channels to stagnate and show hints of decline. I had made a couple of very large errors. Firstly, I had promoted someone to a position that, whilst they were really excited for and keen on doing it, they were absolutely not equipped with the toolkit to do it to the level that I needed. But that was my fault. I hadn't taken the time to train them up and offload responsibilities in a timely manner. I also hadn't realized that some things that I could do well, like understand what titling styles worked for certain niches, they just couldn't. The other mistake I made was one of split attention. When you fully commit to something, there's this exponential factor for growth as you are fully immersed and thinking about that thing on and off the job. I wasn't doing this anymore, so I was missing key shifts in the niches we operated in, which meant we weren't adapting fast enough to keep up with the competition. But that was a problem to be solved later, because at the time I was living my best corporate life. There were interesting client conversations I was a part of, macroeconomic debates with experienced and really intelligent research analysts, and I was going to really fancy graduate social events in venues in London that as a kid I only saw on TV and in movies, and best of all, it was all free. On top of that, I had a new friend group of highly ambitious rich people who were dynamic and novel to me, a person who grew up in a poor, forgotten town where the idea of making it big was moving one town over to a small city, which was effectively a large version of the town that we all grew up in. Rolling into 2023, when I was fully cognizant of my underperforming YouTube business, it was not the time to try and fix it, as I was about to embark on a 6-month rotation in one of the more intense investment banking teams, which had 7 AM in-office start times and a 14-hour flat-out working style, with weekdays being called into question. The content was really interesting, and the team's work, which was all equity banking products and corporate financial strategy focused, was really engaging. But it was brutal. There was zero bandwidth for me to think about anything relating to YouTube, and I saw a notable deterioration in my physical and mental health, which was proven both visually by not having visible abs for the first time in my life, as I'd gone from this athletic low body fat build to straight up blob in 6 months, and my bank paid for annual health assessment proved it as well. My doctor had gone from saying, "I don't understand how you're this healthy," to, "What have you done? You need to fix this before you do some permanent damage." If you've ever heard someone blame their manager for them being fat, that's kind of how I felt, and it might actually be true. What was actually happening to my body was a classic case of cortisol gut. I was placed under significant stress and lacked sleep, which led to a major hormonal shift in my body. My testosterone had dropped due to my poor sleep, and my cortisol was spiked 24/7, which meant my body was in a continuous state of self-preservation. Evolutionary biologists believe there is a mechanism here, as when early Homo sapiens experienced stress, it was usually due to a lack of food, so the body compensated by storing as much fat as possible, specifically visceral fat held around the organs. Fast forward to 2023, and my sorry ass was stressed out in a cubicle, gaining fat around my stomach for the first time ever due to borderline supraphysiological dosages of stress and anxiety. So it was time for change. Once that rotation finished, I chose to go back to a different team in the bank, which, while still being intense compared to a normal 9 to 5, was nothing compared to the previous team that I was in. Now I would have time to breathe, focus on my physical health, and re-energize my YouTube business. But I couldn't fall back into the same structure of having lots of faceless YouTube channels with dozens of freelancers working for me to oversee, because it wasn't motivating to me anymore, regardless of the financial incentive. I decided that this would be a time for me to actually be front-facing. It would be the first time in 13 years I had appeared on camera in a YouTube video, and I looked different. A lot different. With 5 years of strategically launching and growing YouTube channels, I had most of the prerequisite skill set, but I was untested on camera and hadn't actually written videos for myself to voice in a long time, so it was time to iterate. I wanted to launch a channel surrounding personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and maybe YouTube strategy. I bought a camera, lens, multiple microphones, lights, and started recording myself. It was at that moment that I realized I absolutely cannot stand the sound of my own voice. I mean, so much so that I had already changed my voice to get into investment banking, but I didn't like that version of me, and I definitely didn't like the accent that I grew up with, which sounded a little bit like this.
Well, it's 4:40 AM.
Because of this, my personality was not translating on screen. Anyone who has met me in person would say I'm bouncing off the walls, energetic and optimistic like an introspective golden retriever on 9 scoops of pre-workout kibble. But when talking to the camera, I found myself not just listening to what I was saying, but analyzing how I was delivering it whilst I was still talking. I couldn't even get 2 sentences out without having to say cut and start over. The first time that I tried to record a 2,000-word script, which is about 8 minutes of my talking time, it took me 3 hours. 3 hours. But I knew this was just part of the process. I just needed to iterate like I'd done on every channel before, so I recorded my first video over and over and over again. Then I asked my editor for some feedback and tried recording a different script, which took 1 hour, and I thought, haha, progress. That took 4 months. Eventually, I realized what I wanted to do with YouTube was something I was already doing in private and for free. Because I'd become known in my social circle in the bank as the YouTube guy with his own personal assistant, people were always asking me questions. What was my company like? Did I have any insight on YouTube and how it works? How much money do you make? Do you know Mr. Beast? Yada yada yada. And occasionally other YouTubers would ask if I'd like to talk to them about their own strategy, to which I said absolutely. Remember that golden retriever-like energy that I spoke about earlier? I will talk to pretty much anyone about anything that I find slightly interesting if they want to talk to me about that thing. And that applies to you guys too, so DM me on Instagram at ArcherYTWarren, email me and let's chat. So today I'm making videos which orientate around YouTube as an experience, YouTube for business growth, as well as investing, personal finance, and setting up a structure which remains challenging and pushes me to be creative. I still have the kids animation channel and another animation channel for adults that I launched recently, and some light YouTube niche experimentation that I'm going to use as case studies in future videos. Having competing interests is fine, but you need to have distinct priorities, and your time allocation and headspace need to match your intended priority and future growth drivers in order for you to prosper. If you think about your career or business for just 30 or 40 hours per week, you can bet your bottom dollar someone else is thinking about it at work, on the train home, and when they sleep at night, and that will give them the edge over you, assuming they do so out of eagerness and not anxiety. If you choose to split priorities, you need to be accepting of the growth constraint you are placing on yourself. Backwards is not always backwards. Don't be afraid to take a step back. Whether you choose to take a step down in income or you choose to go back to a different industry you'd previously quit, that does not always mean you're actually going backwards. It may be that it's taken a number of years for you to realize what matters to you and where you're best suited to grow. In this sense, you have actually taken a step forwards, even if your income or job status on the surface seem to have lowered. We all know what regret is, but regret is something you can choose to experience. It's not a mandatory feeling. I structure whether I regret something like this. Do I believe that at the time I made the decision, I did so with as much information that I could have at the time and make the decision that at the time I felt most comfortable with? I ask myself this because it's easy to get caught in hindsight. For example, if I had stayed working solely on my YouTube business, I would have made a lot more money. And over the last 3 years, I would have been a lot less stressed. But at the time, I didn't have that information because I didn't know my YouTube channels would continue growing, and I didn't know how stressful certain elements of investment banking would be. But what I did know was that I was keen to explore another personal interest I'd held for many years, and that it would be a social experience which I felt like I was lacking through YouTube. So based on that, I don't regret any of my actions. If you're considering a career pivot or starting a YouTube channel, just go for it. And if you want help from me, ask down in the comments below.